You might have heard this term floating around in some pretty serious financial circles, blue gold. So what is it? Today, we're going to unpack exactly what that means and why some people are calling it the single most important investment of our lifetime.
Yeah, for years now, this whisper has been making the rounds in some very exclusive boardrooms. And the idea is pretty wild when you think about it. That water, the stuff we need to live, is becoming the next big commodity, just like oil or gold.
So that brings up a really good question, right? Why on earth is smart money, we're talking big-time investors here, buying up a resource that, well, falls from the sky for free? It sounds kind of crazy, but stick with me. We're about to get into the why behind it all. Okay, so it really all boils down to one simple and honestly pretty alarming fact. Our planet is getting incredibly thirsty. This whole blue gold rush, it's all being fueled by a growing global water shortage. All right, now this is where things get really eye-opening. We all learn in school, right? The blue planet, covered in water. But look at this breakdown. It completely shatters that myth. A whopping 97.5% of it is salt water, useless for drinking or farming. Most of what's left is locked up in glaciers and ice caps. That tiny, tiny sliver that we all rely on for, everything, it's less than 1%. Let that sink in. Less than 1%. So what's putting the squeeze on that tiny little fraction of fresh water? Well, it's kind of like a perfect storm. First, you've got population growth. More people means we just need more water. Then there's climate change, which is throwing rainfall patterns all out of whack. Pollution is contaminating the water we do have, and to top it all off, we're dealing with inefficient management and rapid urbanization, which just puts even more strain on the system. It's a massive challenge from all sides.
And look, this isn't some far-off sci-fi problem. The UN predicts that by 2050, which is not that far away, a staggering 5.7 billion people could be facing water scarcity. We're talking more than half the entire planet's population. That's a huge, huge number.
And the stakes here are just incredibly high, because a water shortage isn't just about being thirsty. Think about it. It's like a domino effect. No water means no crops, so you get food insecurity. It leads to health crises. It stalls economies. It can even lead to social unrest and environmental collapse. It's a fundamental threat to, well, everything.
So, this growing crisis has basically set the stage for a massive shift. I mean, it's economics 101, right? Where there's scarcity, there's value. And that is exactly how something as basic as water starts to transform from a simple human need into a tradable financial asset.
This idea of controlling water isn't new. For literally thousands of years, we've had rules about it. You go back to ancient Babylon, they had codes for it. The Romans had their own complex laws. Even in the American West, it was all about first in time, first in right. So this long, long history of treating water like a type of property eventually led us to December 2020. That's the moment it hit the futures market, and you could trade it just like oil.
And this leads us to the big kind of jargony word for all this, financialization. But all it really means is taking water from being a public good, something managed by the government for everyone, and turning it into a private asset that you can buy and sell. Its price is set by the market. And that right there is a massive, massive shift in thinking.
So how do investors actually get in on this? Well, it's basically a three-part playbook. First, they can buy land that comes with water rights. They're literally buying the source. Second, they can invest in the infrastructure, the plumbing, all the companies that clean, store, and move water around. And finally, the most direct way, they can trade water futures on the open market, betting on what the price will be down the road, exactly like they do with gold or corn. Now, as you can probably guess, this whole transformation has kicked off a huge and pretty fierce global debate. It really comes down to one central question. Is water a fundamental human right, or is it just the ultimate commodity?
And this is really the question at the very heart of the blue gold rush. I mean, think about it. Should we really be putting a price tag on it? Should we let the free market decide who gets our most vital resource? And for how much? There are some really strong arguments on both sides of this.
So let's break this down. On one hand, you have the argument for pricing it. The logic is, if water has a price, people will be more careful with it. It encourages efficiency and conservation. Plus, it brings in private investment to help fix our crumbling infrastructure. But then on the other hand, the argument against it is pretty compelling too. Critics warn that it could make water completely unaffordable for the poorest people, lead to wild speculation, and maybe even let a few giant companies control our entire water supply. A scary thought.
And anchoring the human rights side of the debate is this really important declaration from the UN. They were crystal clear.
access to safe, affordable water isn't a privilege you buy. It's a fundamental human right, and governments have a duty to make sure their citizens have it.
So yeah, this debate it's not just some academic exercise. It's forcing us to make some really tough choices right now about how we're going to manage water for ourselves, for our kids, and for generations to come.
Now, the good news is it's not all doom and gloom. There are real solutions on the table. We have technology like desalination that can literally turn ocean water into drinking water. We can get way smarter about how we use it with things like smart irrigation in farming. We can double down on conservation and reusing wastewater. But maybe the most important piece of the puzzle is strengthening governance, making sure we have strong, fair rules in place to manage water for everyone.
And that really brings us back to the big question, doesn't it? Blue gold. Is it the key to our survival, something we all need to protect and share? Or is it the ultimate commodity, destined to be bought and sold? How we decide to answer that is going to define our future. And really, the choice, and whatever comes next, belongs to all of us.